Welcome to your weekly astrological weather. This is your place to get practical guidance for not only surviving, but thriving with the cosmic tides. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. It is so great to be here with you all, and I am very, very excited to have Rick Merlin Levine back with us on the weekly weather this week. Hi, Rick.
Hello, hello, hello.
And we are both traveling, so our backgrounds are different, and we're in different parts of the country, but we're really happy to be here with all of you. And Rick, I mean, we can start with the theme. And I just want to ask like an overarching question, because I don't know about you and everybody in the audience, but this eclipse was, wow. I mean, this eclipse was definitely felt it. Like it was not subtle. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, is this week going to be sort of the aftermath kind of week of such an intense astrology, or do we have more of that?
We definitely have more of that, but I would say that this week, there's a phrase, and I'm not sure we want to use this. We're working toward the theme for the week. The phrase, the calm before the storm?
Yeah.
This is like the little storm between the two big ones. In other words, we've had a large stormy period, if you will, with the eclipse and so on. And I think as we get toward the middle of May, this is a pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a happening month. There's a lot going on, and it actually begins this week, but it's not quite at the level that it will be at later on in the month. And it's not all bad. It's there's excitement wrapped up in this month. This month is there's a feeling of that thing that change. Got it. Change is in the air.
That is so good. And I can feel it. And I think for that, I say this Michael Beckwith quote a lot because I love it, that pain pushes until vision pulls. And isn't it good? And it really has been, a lot of things that it's like, oh gosh, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Okay. What's the change that needs to happen? Right.
Right.
But before we dive deep into the weather, let's talk about the exciting thing that's happening this week, which is that we are starting the chart reading extravaganza part 2, focused on timing and transits on Thursday. So if you're not yet in that course with Rick, I highly recommend checking it out and joining us if you want to see Rick reading charts for students and focusing on timing things, which eclipses are going to be a part of that. Solar arcs, progressions. What else is going to be covered in the class, Rick?
Solar arc progressions and transit. So really, we'll do some solar returns, some birthday charts. We'll look at Saturn return, and we'll look at some other things. But those will be the main things. And I am so excited about this. As you know, Amanda, I love reading charts, but the timing stuff is it's the coolest part of astrology. I mean, it's fascinating to look at a chart and to know that you know something about the dynamics of that person. And of course, to talk about timing, we'll have to do some of that. It's not like we're going to ignore the interpretation of a chart, excuse me, because, transits don't happen unless it's already somehow in your chart. Everything goes back to a chart. If you got a strong Saturn transit or movement or progression happening, what's Saturn doing in your own chart or in the chart that you're looking at? And so, and to say that we're just looking at 2 charts a week for 8 weeks doesn't quite do it, because what happens is that each of those 8 charts becomes the curriculum. The curriculum is, instead of out of some dry textbook and learning that transiting Uranus means this and whatever, we're going to be looking at a chart and talking about transiting Uranus with the person that's experiencing it. And we'll say, so what's going on? What went on for you in the spring of 2014? And we'll hear the stories, and then we can kind of clean up and explain what the connection is between the real life and the actual, astrological information, if you will.
I love that so much, Rick. I can't tell you how many times I'll see a post in our inner circle online community. Someone's going through a transit and they're saying, hey, I've looked it up in all the books and it sounds really scary in all the books, or it just sounds, it's not really matching my experience. What are your experiences? And then people will start sharing about their Pluto transit or their, whatever. And it just comes to life in a totally different way. So I love that we get to do this. I love that you're doing this with us. Thank you so much, Rick. If you're interested in checking this out, go to astrologyhub.com/timing. You do not have to have taken Astrology Foundations Level 1, Astrology Foundations Level 2, or our first chart reading extravaganza. You can dive in right here for this course. And then if you decide you want to take the other ones down the road, you can do that too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So check it out again. It's astrologyhub.com/timing. And let's talk about this week, Rick. So we have change is in the air.
Yes.
We've already described it as kind of like a mini storm in between two big storms. I'm assuming we've already had the first big storm. Now we're having a mini storm this week, or a kickoff storm for a bigger storm that's coming.
It's almost like it's a setup. I mean, I can't tell you. All right, I can tell you.
Tell us.
I'm bummed that I have to talk about this week instead of next week.
Oh.
Because this week is really preparation for Mercury turning retrograde next week, Jupiter moving into Aries next week, and the second of the two eclipses at the end of the week. And so it's like a major shift. And we're getting the first taste of it this week. The eclipse that happened a couple of days ago, most people know that the eclipse was about 4 degrees away from Uranus. The eclipse was therefore conjunct Uranus. Therefore, people talked about how the eclipse had change built into it. There was surprise. There was Uranus, the planet of shock and awe, Uranus, the great awakener. But the thing is that if the eclipse itself was more like 5 degrees away from the sun, that means that within hours after the eclipse, the moon lined up with the sun, which is why we could talk about how it was such a Uranian eclipse, because the moon was ready to go right into the sun. However, we actually have on May 5th, the sun catching up to Uranus. And I would say that that's one of two of the biggest events of the week, that the sun catches up and lines up with Uranus. It's very early in the morning. So really, rather than being Thursday, we could probably think of it as Wednesday. But I love the idea, Amanda, that we are starting our course on timing with the sun conjunct Uranus, because this is about change. This is about dynamic change in response to things that come up. And you see, Uranus is an interesting planet because it becomes more powerful as, how do I want to say this? It becomes more powerful as the events become less powerful. What I mean by that is that Uranus has a way of finding that which is stuck, that which is hidden, that which is buried. And we all have issues in our life. One of the great mistakes that we make, and that psychology counselors often make, is that you can talk everything out. You got a problem? Talk about it. Well, I would suggest that everyone, even you, even me, that everyone has some certain things that you don't talk about with some certain people, because you know that when you do, it never goes anywhere good. And the more you talk about it, I mean, everyone has this with some issue with one, especially family stuff. You know, we have things that we just don't talk about with our parents. We just know better, you know? And you see, Uranus loves this kind of stuff, because the more stress there is that's buried, the more tension, the more things that are stuffed into somatic issues in our belly, in our backs, in our big toe, in our joints, the more stuff that's stuck away, that stronger the spark, the lightning strike of lightning is going to be, because that lightning has to strike hard enough to get to whatever it is that's buried. So it's out in the open. So all of a sudden you do not have a choice. Deal with it. Talk about it. You know, things happen under the influence. We're living under the influence this week, but we're not under the influence of the psychedelephant. We're now, the Neptune Jupiter conjunction, even with Venus there. And as you know, Amanda, I'm here in Tucson, Arizona, at the tail end of the conference for the Organization for Professional Astrology, and Gemini Brett, led a group of about 50 of us at 3:30 in the morning out into this very dark place out in the desert. And we had our minds blown, because most of us astrologers look at charts, and there we were within a chart. So anyhow, I go off topic only a little bit, but that was a Uranian kind of experience, because it breaks through, and Uranus is a breakthrough. So I think that this week, if there's an underlying theme to this sense of change, it's don't wait until you've been struck by lightning and have lost all your hair because it singed every piece of hair on your body, and you're lying by the edge of the road kind of dazed, going, what the hell just happened? Because that's often, and of course I'm talking in exaggeration and metaphor here, but often when we get Uranus transits, it's like, if it's a wake-up call, it's a wake-up call. It's like getting smacked across the face, like, holy smokes, I had no idea this was coming. But the fact of the matter is that the best way to prepare for the unexpected, which is how Uranus normally works, is to move. And I don't mean to move from Hawaii to Texas or wherever one might move. I mean to move the body, to wiggle your hips. And I use that wiggle your hips particularly relevant because it has sexual implications. But it's not about sex. It's about the energy that occurs in sex. And so in a way, there's that sense the yogis would call this kundalini or chi or ki. And what we're trying to do is to move that energy and to get it circulating. Anything we can do to do that, whether it's physically in our own body or metaphysically in thoughts and communication in people in our lives, it's really, really important to stir the pot, or at least get it stirring, so that as we move through the period of time towards Wednesday, Thursday of this week, and we're already feeling this now, there's not a lot of let up from the eclipse to this conjunction. But the point is that if we get lazy, there's a Rumi poem that something is, the morning is blah, 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 blah. Do not go back to sleep. The birds are singing. I'm doing this it's not exact. There's like the birds are singing and the sky is turning blue. Do not go back to sleep. And the poem is not about pulling the covers over your head and going back to sleep. It's about, metaphorically, it's a Uranus. It's the planet of awareness. We need to use this transit to become aware and do not go back to sleep.
Whew, wow. So good, Rick. So much there. So, but when you were speaking, and I totally get the moving the energy and just sort of circulating the energy. And the thing that I've noticed is that because it's surprising where it comes from and is bringing up things that are under the surface that you might not be aware of, it's hard to proactively address it because you don't really know where it's going to come from.
Exactly. That's why movement of any sort is the best preparation, because we don't know where it's going to come from. And often the things that are hidden, there's two ways to hide things psychologically. One is by suppression, which is, I'm going to visit my parents. I better not talk about, my partner who they don't like for whatever reason, or whatever. That's suppression. Suppression is when we consciously say, I'm not going there. The other form of hiding things is called repression. And whenever someone says, I repress that all the time, I go, no, you don't. And I go, yes, I do. I go, no, you don't. Because if you know you're doing it, you're not repressing it. Repression is totally unconscious. And unconscious means that you're not aware of it. And whether you would like to admit it or not, we all got shit in our lives that we're not aware of. I don't care how much work you've done. There's stuff that happens that you're not aware of. That's the stuff Uranus likes. And that's why it's unexpected. That's why we can't prepare for it. It's like, I remember maybe 25 years ago, there was a lightning strike. There was a storm and there were several lightning strikes, and Yellowstone Park burned terribly. I mean, hundreds of thousands of acres, thousands of square miles were just incinerated. And the environmentalists were quite upset because anyone who's been to Yellowstone, I have, it's like an extraordinary place. And they were saying the park is ruined. I mean, it's like we've lost half the park and so on. And well, now 25 years later, the same ecologists are saying that the flora and fauna in Yellowstone have never been so strong throughout recent history. But you see what Uranus does is the fire wouldn't have burned as intensely if the forests didn't need full tending, cleansing, the underbrush that gets so thick it strangles the growth. And so what happens is that once everything is burned, the fire actually energizes things and creates almost like an empty petri dish, for new bacteria to grow on, but it's not bacteria, it's life. And the same thing happens in our lives. Often with Uranus, and I can think of a couple of examples in my life, and I know in the timing, classes throughout this month, Uranus is often the most dramatic of what happens in life because it's so sudden, so unexpected, and more often than not, the results are fantastic if we don't strive to hold on to what it is that we think we need to hold on to, because if the other key word for Uranus is freedom or independence, maybe even better. But often what happens with the Uranus transit is we end up being more independent than we ever bargained for or thought about. And that can be frightening in itself. And so often, we have, for example, and Uranus transits are not always tragic. There have been people who were elected president during their Uranus transit. People win Nobel Prizes during a Uranus transit. It comes out of the blue, it's unexpected, and it changes their life. But people's houses burn down under a Uranus transit. In fact, there is this wonderful piece of writing from an astrologer in the late 18th century, which is when Uranus was discovered, saying we're trying to figure out this whole Uranus thing. And this is something he actually wrote. And I have this really strong Uranus transit today, and I'm waiting to see what it is that might happen to help me understand Uranus. And at that time, his servants broke into the house. They had to evacuate the house because the house was on fire.
Wow.
So,
yeah,
Unexpected. You're right. We can't prepare for it, but we can prepare for it psychologically by saying whatever it is that comes up, the worst thing we can do is to push it into further denial. How do we dance with it? How do we work with whatever it is that comes out into the open? And again, doesn't have to be, bad at all. One of my memorable Uranus transits was the year that I met, fell in love with, married, and had a kid all within a year. And it was great. It was a fantastic year, but it wasn't what I had on my books for that year.
Right.
And so Uranus transits can be tremendous gifts, and yet a lot of people live in fear of Uranus transits. It's change, and it's change that's got to happen. It's important. Anyhow, that's one piece of the week, but it's an important piece of the week because it ties the eclipse from Saturday all the way up to the event of the sun conjoining with Uranus on late Friday. It'll be either late Wednesday night, very late Wednesday night, or early Thursday morning, and that means that even by Friday and Saturday, it'll still only be a degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees away. So this is going to be the flavor all week of the, oh my God, what next? And so if we're mentally prepared for that, then that's cool, because whatever it is that happens, we roll with the punches. We kind of use that energy. I might have said here or somewhere else this week that we Westerners often live our lives with the metaphor of Western boxing, which is built upon block and parry. And so any incoming thing, you use energy to stop it, and then you hit back. Whereas in the East, especially with Aikido, but with other martial arts too, that if a punch comes in, the master is thinking, this is fantastic, because I don't have to strike. I can use the energy of this punch and let it ripple, help it ripple through the system and out the other side. And it energizes me, and I'm not wasting energy trying to stop it. Instead, I'm letting it run through. And that's a great metaphor for dealing with any difficult situation, but certainly with Saturn and Uranus transits.
Yeah, I've found, especially traveling this week, that knowing that unexpected things could happen and probably will happen has made it much easier to just, kind of flow with the things that come up. And there's been periods of time on this trip specifically where I've felt like I'm in some sort of slapstick comedy show where it's just like, are you serious? Like, is this really happening? And it's been comical. But I think knowing that's the way the energy is right now can just help us. And then also keeping in mind that it's a breakthrough. Like, this is an opportunity for a breakthrough. If I see it that way, if I work with it that way, then it's an opportunity for a breakthrough. Okay. So we have this Sun Uranus. This is flavoring. I mean, this whole Uranian energy is flavoring the whole week. On Wednesday, Thursday, we have Sun conjunct Uranus.
Yes.
So this is going to be a major part of the week. What else astrologically is big?
And in fact, let's also mention that today, on May 2nd, we also have Venus making a half square with Uranus. So, a square 90 degrees, half a square is 45 degrees. That half square is also an aspect of change, of stress. And here it's about Venus being pleasant, nice, love, money things. It doesn't mean that these things are going to be bad, but because Uranus is already so close to the sun, that Venus is going to make a half square to Uranus, and it'll stir up some of that Uranian energy today. And then also on May 4th, which is on Wednesday, Mars is going to be sextile Uranus, and that too will stir up the energy. The difference is that the half square today on Monday can be difficult to integrate. And it can take energy to actually figure out how to integrate that Venus semi-square Uranus, because it can be disruptive. Now, on Wednesday, the fact that Mars makes a sextile with Uranus, here's an easy flow of energy. But Mars and Uranus together, this is fireworks. Because Mars gives a physical energy to that Uranian lightning. And so, and here's a good example of why using good and bad in astrology doesn't work the way we would like it to. Oh, it would be so much simpler if it did. But if Mars is squaring Uranus, that can be an easy, that's the sextile, cooperative, that's the sextile, expression physically, Mars, of dynamic and powerful and sudden change, Uranus. It's an aspect of war. Now, obviously, there are parts of the country or parts of the world that are always at war. I mean, I don't mean the same place, but there's always, conflict going on. And that Mars sextile Uranus can, in fact, be an easier flow of energy that allows the conflict to be solved, or it can be an easier flow of energy that gives me more ability to release more destruction. Mm-hmm. But the point I'm making, though, is that even though the sun's conjunction to Uranus is not until Thursday, we're getting other faster moving aspects against that all week.
Okay. All right. And what else?
Enough on Uranus, huh?
Yeah. Is there anything else to pay attention to?
A couple of things. I think the next thing of importance is the fact that that today, Monday, May 2nd, if I'm not mistaken, that Venus is changing signs and moving into Aries. Now, this is a bit of it's a funny kind of harbinger, because, we had we had the sun already moving through Aries, and now Venus moves through Aries. The sun is on to Taurus, but Venus moves into Aries on the 2nd, and then on the 10th, Jupiter moves into Aries, and then at the end of the month, on May 24th, Mars moves into Aries. Now, I know by contract I'm not supposed to speak about anything beyond this week, but the fact is that this Aries energy, which we had a taste of when the sun moved through Aries back toward the end of March and through the early part of April, we're getting another wave of Arian energy. First with Venus, that as Venus moves into Aries today, it's, I like this newness. Whatever this new Aries, whatever this newness is that's going on, I kind of am digging it. I want more change. I want more things to be happening. And then by the 10th, when Jupiter makes its big change from Pisces into Aries, that whole energy is going to become even more. We're going to find ourselves in someplace really new and different. But in some ways, even though Jupiter is the largest of these planets, Mars, when it moves into Aries on the 24th toward the end of the month, this is a coming home party. Mars is at home in Aries. And so we're getting here and that'll be the end of the month. But what we're getting here with Venus moving into an Aries is kind of a re-stimulation of everything that is Aries-like, which are things that are new, things that are impulsive, things that are spontaneous, things that have to do with being in charge of the moment. Aries is the Ram Dass line, be here now, which sounds easy, but the Buddhists teach when you're in the present moment, it can be very difficult because you allegedly have no connection or remembrance of the past and no attachment to the future. It's intense living in the moment. And when Venus moves into Aries today, actually in a couple of hours, we'll like that idea of being in the moment more than we usually do. I always think of Venus moving into Aries as this sweet, kind of pretty, soft Venus in Pisces, where she's exalted, wearing, very sweet, like mohair, angora, gentle fabrics. And then Venus moves into Aries, and all of a sudden those fabrics are gone, and she's wearing red leather. And so Venus in Aries technically is not a happy camper. Technically, she's in exile because she's as far away from Libra, which is a home sign, as she can get. And yet it really begins to stir up that energy. So Venus moving into Aries is another strong piece. The third piece that we need, excuse me, the third piece we need to talk about is Mercury. And although Mercury doesn't turn retrograde until the 10th, when everything else that's happening this month seems to happen, it's slowing down. It's barely moving. Mercury is at 2.25 degrees today on Monday, May 2nd. By the end of the week, by May 9th, Mercury is in 4 degrees of Gemini. That's barely less than 3 degrees in an entire week. Last month, Mercury was moving almost 2 degrees a day. That's 14 degrees in a week. So Mercury, even though it's not retrograde yet, it's in its own shadow, that area that it moves through direct, through again retrograde, through again direct, and then on. That area is being affected. And so anyone who has planets in early degrees of mutable signs, or even in late degrees of fixed signs, because this is Mercury's shadow. This week in particular, it's the people who have Mercury in Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces that are going to be most affected by Mercury slowing down and feeling like I'm not making progress where I was.
So that's what I was going to ask you. If you have early mutable or late fixed and Mercury slowing down, what will that mean for you? I mean, it feels like what's happening.
Well, it might just feel sluggish. It might feel like something that was moving along really, really well has now bogged down for one reason or another. And of course, this is the stuff that Uranus likes.
Right. That's an interesting pairing with all this Uranian energy.
Yeah, it is.
That's blowing things up and stimulating things and moving things.
And in a way, that's some of the theme of this whole month. Because there's so much forward moving with Venus moving into Aries, Jupiter moving into Aries, Mars moving into Aries, and yet Mercury is retrograde.
Okay. What's your take? I don't know if we've ever talked about this. What's your take on signing contracts or launching something new when Mercury's retrograde and or in the shadow?
All right, don't get me started on this one.
Okay. I think I already did.
All right, so, there is that thing, don't sign contracts, don't buy a car, don't buy a computer, don't sell a house, don't travel. Mercury is retrograde for almost 2.5 months a year. 3 times, 3 weeks at a time, 9 weeks or so a year. It's crazy to think that, that we shouldn't do something for that amount of time every year. If someone calls me as an astrologer and says, we've been looking for a house just came up on the market, but Mercury is retrograde, should we wait until it goes direct? And my answer is it a good deal? Because if it's a good deal, you wait till Mercury goes direct, the deal's going to be gone. Excuse me. The danger with signing contracts while Mercury is retrograde is while Mercury is retrograde, because from Earth's point of view, it's replaying energy and it feels like we're not making progress, we tend to be frustrated and want to get there faster. We tend to sign the contract without reading it.
Oh, okay.
We tend to buy the car. I had a friend a number of years ago who had been thinking about a new car. Mercury was retrograde, and he decided he was just going to go out and look just to see what's out there. And the first lot he walked into had this beautiful Porsche that was a repo, and it was such an amazing deal. I mean, it was really a good deal, and everything about it was right. And he bought it on the spot. And it wasn't until he had it at home that he said, what am I going to do with my dog and my wife and my kid?
Yes. Oh, God.
That's a Mercury retrograde story because it was a good deal. It was just like I got to do it right now. And while Mercury is slowing down as it is now, and when it turns retrograde, and later on when it turns direct, Mercury technically moved into its own shadow on April 25th. It turns retrograde on May 10th. It actually backs all the way up to late Taurus from Gemini and turns direct on June 3rd. And then it moves out of its shadow in mid-June, June 18th. Now, through this whole time, the issues of Mercury retrograde are cooking. It's around the two stations that they're most intense, around May 10th and around June 3rd. But the deal is not, let me say, the deal is that if you're going to sign a contract, don't sign it like on the moment you see it. Read it. Read it again. Talk to a friend about things that might not make sense in it. Get an attorney. Talk to your tax accountant if there's something that's financial in it, because it's the jumping to conclusions. I'll give you an example of how that Mercury works. You're driving along in your car in Los Angeles. You're in 6 or 7 lanes of traffic, and you have directions as to where you're going, but you're not familiar with driving there. And you look down and you see that your gas tank is all of a sudden very low. And you notice that because you're in stop and go traffic that's mostly stop. And you freak out because you realize if I was just driving there, I'd be there no problem, but I may not have enough gas to make it there. And to get stuck on a freeway, that'd be just awful. And so out of panicking, you get over a lane, you get over a lane, you get over another lane. You're now in the 3rd lane. You get over 2 more lanes and and finally the first exit that comes along, you're there because you need to get off the freeway, and you get off the freeway. And it's Los Angeles, you find yourself in 5 lanes of traffic on another freeway. In other words, it's when we do things that aren't thought through out of panic in the moment. That's Mercury retrograde's favorite, grounds for making something happen. And, it's interesting because it takes Mercury about 88 days to go around the sun. And it takes Uranus about 88 years to go around. It's actually 84 to go around the sun. And there's an octave it's what astrologers call an octave relationship between Mercury, and they say that Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. They're both intellectual, they're both dry, they're both about a process of thought that it gives them significance. And the truth is that Mercury is about a thought. Uranus is about the nervous system. So in a way, Uranus is the distribution of the thought. But I think it'll be interesting to see how even this week we might begin to feel the pangs of that Mercury retrograde. And the thing is with Mercury retrograde is to breathe and to watch, to observe, and to not necessarily push forward as hard as you think that you should. And again, that's going to be tough with planets moving into Aries First Venus, then Jupiter, and also that Sun Uranus, which wants resolution in the immediate be here now present. And now we have into that Mercury crawling along. It creates an interesting dynamic.
Okay, I love too. I think it's Gemini Brett is oh gosh, I can't remember which astrologer, but essentially when things aren't going the way you want them to during Mercury retrograde or any retrograde, but let's just use Mercury retrograde right now, you can actually ask the planet, okay, what do you want me to pay attention to right now? So your computer's not working, your car, whatever is happening that's frustrating you, instead of just being frustrated and trying to bulldoze through it or get more and more frustrated, taking a pause and going, okay, what do I need to pay attention to here that I'm not paying attention to?
Right.
Show me. Yeah.
Right. And I think that, and you see, that does two things. Number one, it puts us in touch with the planets.
Right.
But number two, it gives us breathing room. I mean, a great Mercury retrograde practice is what I call counting to 10. Instead of just reacting, respond, don't react. And because reaction occurs immediately, a reaction is not conscious. And so we want to make that which is not conscious. And so, I think the trap of Mercury retrograde, though, on the other side, is frightening us into thinking that we can't do anything. And I would say that anything that you would do with Mercury direct is fair game to do when Mercury is retrograde. Even starting a project, which they say, don't start a project when Mercury is retrograde. Well, don't start a project that you thought about in the morning at noon if it involves hiring 30 people and, that is a typical Mercury retrograde. Wow, that's such a great idea. Why don't you start on it? And Joe, you do this, and Frank, you do that, and Mary, you do that. Let's meet again tomorrow. We'll make this happen by the end of the week. That's a typical Mercury retrograde scenario where all of a sudden we got a new plan. Mercury retrograde, however, is much better for the plan that you were working on last week, last month, and saying, how are we going to take this to the next step? But the idea is that we can't push it forward as fast and as far as we would like. Often the way we play Mercury retrograde is we do the work that we can do on whatever the objective is that we're looking at. And we do the work. And then when Mercury turns direct, it's almost like a new moon. That's the time to start something and let it grow to fulfillment. So when Mercury turns direct, that's when we begin to push forward. And when it moves out of its shadow, now it's mature enough to become something on its own.
Love it. Okay. I love also what Caitlin says here. I always increase my meditation and self-reflection time during Mercury retrograde. This has helped me to stay more aware and focused and not leap before I look into the details. That's some great input there, Caitlin. Thanks. Okay.
And I think that that's important, but I also think Mercury retrograde is not a time to go to sleep.
Right.
I mean, relaxing and certainly doing your recharging is okay, but it's not necessarily a time to just do nothing. In fact, things that we do when Mercury is retrograde can be the most important things that we'll ever do, because Mercury will turn direct. And it's like Thomas Jefferson once said, the more I prepare, the luckier I seem to get. Mm-hmm. And Mercury retrograde is a time to prepare. Yeah. By the way, a couple of people in the chat room said that they hope I feel better. I feel great. It's the middle of the night for me, just about. So, I feel fine if I seem a little bit stuffed up. I'm not sick. I'm just still not fully moving.
Yeah. So Rick's a serious late night owl, and he sleeps a lot during the day. So I said, Rick, we kind of need to do this early in the morning on Monday. Can you do that? And he said, I'll do it. I'll be there. But yes, for Rick, this is the middle of the night. we basically woke you up at 2 a.m.
Thank you for your concern, but I'm great. Yeah. And plus I'm traveling. I'm not, right. But I'm fine. But so don't worry. My brain is functioning. Trust me.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. So we have three major things that we've talked about, which I will gladly summarize, but I wanted to see if there's a fourth or a fifth.
Well, there's toward the end or middle of the week on May 5th and May 7th, we have a couple of things that lighten the load a little bit, and they're worth mentioning because oftentimes we astrologers, like a psychoanalytic patient, we focus on the bad, and on May 5th, which is the first day of the astrology extravaganza, the timing program for the month of May. On May 5th, the day that the sun conjuncts Uranus early that morning, we also have Mercury making a sextile with Venus. Normally, this would be just something that would happen really quickly and then we'd forget about it. However, because Mercury is moving so slowly because it's coming toward a retrograde, this carries a little more weight. And Mercury sextiling Venus is it's a time for communication. It's a time for Mercury cooperatively supporting Venus, that which is sweet. This is a great aspect to start the extravaganza on, because it actually indicates a flow of energy verbally, intellectually, cerebrally. That would be Mercury, and Venus, that which is nice, that which feels good. So that's on May 5th. And it's later in the day, but we'll be feeling that all day again because Mercury is moving so slowly. Then on Saturday, May 7th, the sun makes a sextile to Mars. And what's interesting now is that between the 5th and the 7th, we have sextiles between Mercury. Well, let's go back. Yeah, between the sun and Mars on the inner and outer, and Mercury and Venus in between. So the four innermost planets astrologically, the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, are all kind of talking with each other in supportive ways. And I think energetically, this is going to feel really good.
I have major things for the week.
Yeah. That's the other. And other than that, we have our moon changing. Remember, look, the moon moves fast enough that whatever we talk about on a major basis, the moon is going to run through its stuff. And I mean, it will, for example, by the 10th, which I know is just a little bit beyond this. Let's come back a little bit more to by May 8th, which is Sunday, the moon will be making its first quarter square to the sun, but will also be squaring Uranus. So we get a few hours of that Uranian craziness, new, exciting, unpredictable. And so the moon is making these little micro kind of changes all the time. We focused on the major things for the week. But behind that, the moon is stimulating everything for a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. And I think you get that more on the inner circle stuff where we're really zoning in on the moon transits day by day.
Yeah. Okay.
I try to stay to the big focus, to the wider perspective.
Perfect. That is what this weekly weather is for. Okay. So Rick, in terms of theme, we have changes in the air, but also breakthrough. So you said changes in the air is the overarching theme, and then breakthrough is kind of the...
Breakthrough is just change that happens fast.
Breakthrough is things that happen fast?
Breakthrough is change that happens fast.
Right. Very true. Okay. So it's the same thing, but different speed.
Different speed.
Yes. All right. Okay, here we go. So the first thing that we're really paying attention to is Uranus, because we have the sun and Uranus conjunct on the 5th, 6th. And this is really extending this Uranian energy that we've been experiencing with this recent eclipse. So you said some of the keys to working with this energy is that it's dynamic change in response to things that come up. So things are coming up they're being brought up, and then there's change as a result of those things that are coming up. You're saying that this is finding stuck, hidden, and buried places within us. The more stuffed it is, the stronger the spark, the stronger the lightning. So the more intense the surprise might be. But again, remembering that this is stuff that needs to come up. I love the example you gave of Yellowstone and the forest and the fire, and how at the time it was the worst thing that could happen. But 25 years later, they're looking at it going, wow, that strengthened this forest more than anything.
Yeah, and remember, Amanda, that's exactly correct. But the flip side of that is there will be plenty of people who go through the week without noticing anything.
Right.
And if anything, that's just simply a report card that says you're on track, you're doing okay. Because Uranus can't be upsetting if there's nothing to upset.
I love that. Thank you for clarifying that. You said a couple of ways to work with this energy proactively. Move the body, especially your hips, that this is circulating energy. This is stirring the pot. And again, it goes to what you just said. There's less stuck places and less places where Uranus needs to actually strike if you're actually proactively moving the energy itself. You said, don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to sleep.
I said that Rumi said that.
Yes, but you reminded us that Rumi said this. And you said that the things that came up with this eclipse, probably one of the worst things we could do is kind of forget about it and be like, okay, well, that happened, but I'm not really going to do anything about it. Change is in the air. Make the changes in a response to the things that came up.
Right.
Okay. You said results are fantastic if we don't strive to hold on to the old.
Yeah.
So if we are not so clutching to what we think it should be, then the results can be fantastic of this kind of a transit. Yeah. How do we dance with it? Let's see. So Venus half square to Uranus. This is potentially some change and stress around love, money, value, those kinds of things.
And that's today.
And that's today. Okay. So you also today, right, is Venus moving into Aries, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
For that,
for those of you who are geeky, that occurs at 9:10 a.m. Pacific time, which would mean just after noon. Yeah, on the East Coast, and so adjust for your time zone.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you said that Venus moving into Aries. I loved the examples you gave of Venus in those like yummy fabrics, so soft and pretty, then donning the red leather and just like, let's go. So this is be in the moment. This is newness. This is being very present. We're going to have this Aries energy amplified a couple other times throughout the month. And Rick, it's okay that you broke your contract today. And you gave us a sneak peek into May 10th and May 24th. So we have on May 10th, Jupiter's moving into Aries. On May 24th, Mars is moving into Aries. You said this is like a coming home party. So we're going to have a lot of this Aries energy happening, and we're going to get our first taste of it here with Venus. That's the second major thing of the week. The third major thing of the week is that Mercury is slowing down. It's barely moving. It's in its shadow. This is going to be felt by people who have placements in early mutable or late fixed signs. They could feel sluggish and bogged down. But so I love the conversation we had about Mercury, though. Think it through, breathe, watch, observe. Don't push things forward. Don't make those crazy, spontaneous, huge decisions. Look at the contract, read it, have your friends look at it, have third, fourth, fifth opinions. Take your time. Respond, don't react. Do the work and then push forward. And if you've already been preparing, right, Rick? So if there's something in your life that you've already been preparing, you've already been working through the details, it's okay to sign the thing during the Mercury retrograde. You've already done the work. You've already been looking through all the details.
Read the fine print.
Yeah. Okay. And then the fourth thing is on May 5th, we have Mercury sextile Mercury sextile Venus, which is a good communication, good flow of energy. May 7th, the Sun sextile Mars, which energetically could also feel really good, and that's Saturday. And then May 8th, you have Moon square Sun, square Uranus, new, exciting, unpredictable. We have that Uranian energy again. Yeah? That's the summary then?
That's pretty good. A couple of things for cleanup, or just to say. One is that there have been a couple of questions that floated through the chat box.
Yeah.
That and any of these aspects are tempered by what your chart is. There are people who have Mercury retrograde natally, and when Mercury turns retrograde, they kind of remember how they work on a best basis. It doesn't mean that they can't function the rest of the year when Mercury is not retrograde, but some people are impacted by Mercury retrograde, especially if Mercury is aspected difficultly in their chart. In fact, I would suggest that if you have a Mercury conjunct or square or opposed Uranus in your chart, that Mercury and Uranus together, hard stressed, that might set you up for being more aware of both the Mercury retrograde and the Uranus Sun, because there's some interplay there. Someone also asked about, well, I already have the Sun conjunct Uranus in my natal chart. And this is something that we'll actually talk about much more in the transit extravaganza, because you have to look at a natal chart to understand how a transit works. And this weekly astrology is transit astrology. I mean, it's where the planets are going and how they affect you. So if you have, and this is an ongoing discussion amongst astrologers, if you have Uranus conjunct your Sun, or your Sun conjunct Uranus in your natal chart, and the Sun is conjuncting Uranus in the sky in that moment, Johannes Kepler said this is actually a connection, even though there may not be an exact aspect. It's a connection because it's your radio station being played up there. Now, you might not have the same reaction that other people do. Why? Because you have that radio station playing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in your life already. So it's the cosmos are now playing something you're familiar with. So you're not going to be caught as off guard, but that's something that reminds you of how you have to live your life. And the same could be said with other planetary transits. You know, if we have a transit that is aspected really easily in our chart, let's say you have Uranus trining the Sun, but now here we have Uranus conjunct the Sun, or let's say you have Uranus trining the Moon, to leave the Sun out of it for a moment. And now we have Uranus conjuncting the Sun. You look at your chart and you go, wow, Uranus really flows easily for you. But this is a harder aspect in the sky, so it might actually be an incredible wake-up call because you're used to the easy side of Uranus because you have a Uranus trine. So again, all these aspects affect us all differently, but the weather is the same. I mean, I love to use the image of, you know, if it's sunny out and you got your suntan lotion in your hand and your beach towel, you're off to the beach, it's great. But if you have your suntan lotion in your hand and your beach towel ready to go and it's raining out, that sucks for you. However, it's the best possible day if you're a duck. Why? Because there's no humans there and you don't mind the wet. You're already wet. So the point here is that a transit is not a one size fits all. There are ducks out there.
I love that example. That is so good. Okay, and then Chrissy's wondering, have you already selected the charts for the timing course? And I know we've selected 2 charts for this week, but I know that we have not chosen charts for the other weeks yet. So,
absolutely not. Yeah. If you haven't registered, submit your chart. We will be selecting them early each week for the following week. Criteria, it's not an issue of personality or whether you submitted first or last. It'll be based upon the lessons and what we're trying to teach. So if you haven't registered, register and submit your chart. The sooner you do that, the more likely that chart will at least get looked at in the pile. But if you register a little late and submit your chart, whenever that is, on whatever it catches, we'll throw that into the hopper.
Awesome. All right. So for those on the podcast that didn't see the link that just came up, It's astrologyhub.com/timing. And that is starting on Thursday. And it'll be every Thursday in May. If you
At
cannot
what
make
time? At
at
5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern time.
yes. And if you
Yes.
cannot make that time, then you will get the recording within 24 hours. So you can stay caught up with the course as we're going along. And what else?
And
Oh,
when you register, there's an hour lesson that you get when you register that you can hopefully go through, before the first class, and that comes with a magnificent. I think magnificent because Astrology Hub did it. I didn't, but they did it from my class that you'll be getting, and you have a handout that goes through the major material. It's a beautiful handout. Thank you, guys.
oh, you're welcome. We know how much everybody loves and appreciates the handouts, so we do put a lot of energy into those. So yeah, that'll be a takeaway. And that is a bonus for this chart reading extravaganza. The 1 hour teaching that you get prior to the live chart demonstrations is a bonus for this actual extravaganza. And then that handout is also a bonus. So tell them what the bonus 1 hour goes through. Like, what are they going to learn?
Well, it's basically an overview of the techniques that we'll be applying. It's what are transits and how do they work and how do they differ from transits and solar returns are on the real movement of the planets to your chart. But then a lot of the tools that astrologers use are symbolic, and they're not based upon where the planets are in reality, and that can be a little bit confusing. So this lesson has gone into the difference between transits, progressions, and solar arc directions. It does mention a few other things, like perfections, which we'll look at, but not very deeply, and time lords. But those three things in particular: transits, secondary progressions, and solar arc directions. The lesson basically explains what they are and how they work. And when we do the actual classes, there'll be some additional handouts that will be available as the classes unfold, because there are particular tools that I use that really help us move through some of these techniques, and that if you have those handouts, that will help you work with them on a regular basis that were not included yet in the handout. So there are some surprises coming.
Yes. Okay. And then Kimberly's asking, what is the Inner Circle code? So Inner Circle members and Rick's Patreon members do receive a discount on this course. If you're a Patreon member, it was emailed to you by Rick. If you're an Inner Circle member, it's in your membership portal. It's also been sent to you in email as well. And if you still don't know what it is, then either go to Mighty Networks and ask the question there, or email support@astrologyhub.com.
Right. And if you're a Patreon subscriber of mine and can't find it, although you should have it, it's been sent out a couple of times, just send me an email at rlevine@stariq.com. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, we'll make sure that you get your discount code.
Fantastic. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you feel prepared for the week ahead and that you won't be the person with the sunscreen and your beach towel and your beach ball for a rainy day. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. Rick, thank you. It's so much fun to have you here on the Weekly Weather. We love the cosmic connection. And
By the way, quick question that came up was someone, they said they were glad to see that I was touching on some Hellenistic tools, and will we be doing zodiacal releasing? The answer is no. That's a course in its own. It's just it's hard to fit that into what we'll be doing. This is a short and intense course, maybe in the future.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.